Hey, so you know how Spotify and everyone is doing like little music raps these days? There's like Switch music, Switch game rap. Everyone's doing a wrapped. Well, guess who else also does a music wrapped? YouTube. For many years now, YouTube has been my primary music streaming platform, mainly due to necessity more so than any kind of like particular brand loyalty. A lot of the music that I listen to literally just doesn't exist on most streaming platforms or is very inconsistent with how much of it you can find. For instance, a lot of it's kind of difficult to find a lot of video game soundtracks on a place like Spotify. And one of my favorite bands of all time, Malice Miser, doesn't even exist on any streaming. Shit, my phone almost fucking exist on any streaming platform except for Pandora randomly. I don't know why. So I do most of my music listening on YouTube because I don't know. I'm used to it, and it's like ad free with an ad blocker, and I actually genuinely have had very good experiences with the auto generated YouTube mixes, and I found some music that I actually really like from it or through YouTube's recommendation algorithm. So YouTube put out a YouTube music wrapped. You don't necessarily need the YouTube music app or service to get one. It's just all the stuff you listen to that they classify as music, uh, summarized for the year. And mine came out a couple days ago, and I figured, hey, why not talk about it? Because it's like 6 a.m. and I'm waiting for the sun to come out so that I can leave my house. This is going to be extremely embarrassing to some degree because I'm gonna put it up right now. I'm gonna put it right here, and you can feel free to look through that. You can, not only is my top artist Basement, I'm in the 0.1% of Basement listeners, the top 0.1%. I don't even like them that much. I think about it, I'm like, yeah, I like them, but like that much? That doesn't feel right. But I guess I have listened to them pretty consistently this year. So the numbers can't lie, I suppose. We're just gonna go through this one by one, but I did happen to just literally as I was getting ready to record this, I was recommended a video by a YouTube channel by the name of Neopunk FM called "What Is Zoomergaze?" And I was like, what? Because there's like two or three albums in the thumbnail or something like that I recognized, and I was like, oh no. And I watched it, and I was like, oh no, this is a video about me. Oh, I do like Julie. Ah. So it's kind of funny that there is, I guess, finally a word for a a type of music that I guess a lot of people my age are into. I'm 21, about to be 22. Um, which is generally this kind of it's this sound that follows a sort of shoegaze, post-hardcore, grunge. It's maybe vaguely goth inspired sound, which no one act necessarily needs to have all of them. It's just that they all just kind of group together. It's actually kind of an interesting case study in the way that seemingly unrelated things or things you might not have grouped together uh, in maybe 10 or 15, 20 years ago now would be just by the way of the fact that we have these recommendation algorithms that completely change the way that we interact with and discover new kinds of entertainment. And my top artists reflect that as as emboldening or disappointing as that is. So to begin with is Basement, which is a all music described as a British hardcore punk and emo quintet. Yes, they are a British band. I guess I suppose they would fit under emo. I kind of just think of them as being like this weird smorgasbord of a bunch of different 90s music genres. Emo kind of fits in that, and I suppose a lot of their music is emotional and Core. I haven't listened to their entire discography, which is why it was weird that they were my top artist. But when I actually looked at their through their albums, oh yeah, their 2012 album, Color Me in Kindness. I really like this album. I haven't listened to their entire discography, so I'm a fake fan, I guess. But Color Me in Kindness is I think a really solid sort of like yeah, vaguely emo, kind of punk uh, rock album. I guess that's how I would describe it. I kind of like basically every song on this album. The first one I heard from them was Covet, which is probably the first song, if you've heard of Basement, probably the first song that you have heard from them. Uh, really cool, just kind of like this. It's got like a heavy kind of feel. Like it kind of comes in these heavy waves, but I wouldn't describe it as particularly like in the way that more like metal would be heavy, if that makes sense. It has a strong, as with a lot of the artists that I like, has a strong like emotional kind of vibe to it. This sort of, I would say the overarching descriptors I would use for this sort of like, if we're gonna call it Zoomercore thing, I would say aggression, distortion, and melancholy. That's the words that I would use. I actually used I used a Basement song as the outro to my Arcades video, which was off of their I believe their second album or their third. I can't really tell. Promise Everything. I used their song For You the Moon, which I really liked. Um, there's a lot there's also another like album that I haven't like listened to super hard, but I also did really enjoy it. I would recommend Basement. Although I would call them like in some sense derivative, but in a good way. My second top artist was honestly the one that I kind of assumed would be number one, which is Fleshwater. Fleshwater is a relatively new band. They had a demo of 3 songs from 2020 and then a full album in 2022 called We're Not Meant to Be Loved. Sorry, We're Not Here to Be Loved, which I discovered this year, kind of like early, midway through the year. And I listened to it like one time. I heard one song off of it. I think the first song I heard was like Woohoo. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Maybe I should listen to some more. And then it was the only thing that I listened to for like 3 weeks. I had this album playing on repeat constantly. And then it was to the point where I did that thing where I got totally burned out on it, and I put it down for like 3 months. And then I listened to it again, and then it was the only thing I listened to for like another month. um, I would describe Fleshwater as being, I actually came up with my own funny little term for it. I called it shoe goth, which is this sort of blend of these really heavy atmospheric shoegaze sounds, a lot of distortion in their guitars, some really great riffs, and an overall kind of, I don't know how I would describe the vibe. It's, I guess that's kind of where the grungy aspect comes in, because it's very dirty, grimy sounding music. It's like one of these bands where like every single song, it's like the song goes exactly where I want it to go. It's like it feels very intuitive. Like, oh, this was made specifically to appeal to me in a way that I didn't even know until I heard it just now. And I patiently await them putting out any more material. I know like a couple of the band members are like the core members are actually from other groups, so maybe that would take a while. But yeah, probably one of my favorite, excuse me, new artists that I've discovered within the last couple of years. Okay, the third one is like it's like easily the hardest to defend. Lil Peep is definitely the odd one out here. And I feel like I have to do a little bit of splaining. So if you don't know, Lil Peep was a rapper who was active from around when did he put out his first his first album? Um, Around like 7, like 20, I want to say maybe 2015 or 16. He is largely credited with creating the sort of like emo rap, or kickstarting the emo rap kind of SoundCloud style. I'm gonna be real. Lil Peep's music, and a lot of girls with like beanies and purple hair would be really upset at me for saying this, but a lot of Lil Peep's music is extremely shallow. And the way that I enjoy his music is a little different from, I think, any of the other artists that I talk about here today. He's a kind of interesting person when you learn about him. Essentially, every single Lil Peep song is about one of three things: having sex, doing/dealing drugs, and dying. Uh, uh, Wanting to die, or feeling dead, or most often I find the reality of his imminent death. When I say was a rapper, I mean he died of an overdose when he was 21, which I guess I beat his record. That's a kind of fucked up thing for me to say. He was apparently this very like musically gifted guy from a relatively well-off family who basically decided that he was going to completely ruin his life. One of the first tattoos. This is such an interesting anecdote. One of the first tattoo I believe he ever got was on his face, and he got it specifically because he wanted it to it would make it harder for him to get a job. It's like that was the kind of nihilistic, self-destructive outlook on life that he had, that carries over and kind of infests and completely saturates all of his music. He talks about death in a way that I have never heard anyone else describe, because there's no sadness, there's no anxiety, there's no sense of dread or melancholy. He treats death as an incredibly casual thing that he expects to happen at some point, and not just like, oh, when, because he was, under he was like, I mean, he died at 21. Most of his music was made when he was younger than I am. And so it's not like this, oh, far off thing, in 70 years, which is so hard for a human brain to even really like conceive of. No, it was like, yeah, a lot of his music is like, yeah, I'm probably gonna die soon, so don't get too attached to me. And when he says soon, he means like, oh, I'm expecting like the next 2 years, maybe. And that's, I don't know, really fascinating to me. It's the most intensely nihilistic music I've ever heard. And not in like a super doomy, depressing way. In fact, I would say, from what I get out of his music at least, he was more so devoted to just like unrestrained hedonism than he was any sort of like depressive contemplation, any kind of pensiveness about the topic. He was totally okay with absolute self-destruction, and it's I want to be real. A lot of his music is very samey. One of the things that he was best at, really, and I think one of the things that I really enjoy about his music is that he was just really good at picking producers. He was very, he had a great ear for a very specific sound that not a lot of other people were really hitting on at that time, and maybe they do now, but I don't know. I don't really keep up with that scene. Actually, the first song that I ever heard from him, really, or that I ever got into from him, is called 19. And I got into it because it samples one of my favorite Modest Mouse songs. My favorite artist of all time is Modest Mouse. I'll probably do a huge long series going over all of their albums on this channel eventually. But he has this song called 19, which samples their song Broke off of my favorite album of theirs. Building Nothing Out of Something. And I was like, that's interesting that they got sampled in like a rap song. And then I liked it, and I found something kind of really interesting about it. There's like one particular line in that song in specific that kind of got me to be more interested in listening to his music and trying to understand who he was, which is this weird line. Shawty told me that she thought that I was 21. Now she want me even more because I'm fucking young. And it's like, he's describing this like almost predatory relationship of this girl who's like, I don't know, I always got the vibe that it's like some girl who's older than him by at least a couple years, who finds out that he's even younger than she thought he was, and that makes her even more attracted to him. And he says it in this way that's like he's almost bragging about it, and I was like, that's so interesting. There's something kind of undeniably compelling about someone like that. It's actually a very unique perspective, and I'm kind of surprised that it was my third most listened to artist. But to be honest, you can put on like a Lil Peep mix and you can go like 2 hours and never hear a single repeat song. A lot of he put out an insane amount of music, and a lot of it sounds kind of similar. If you can sort of enjoy, like, I don't relate to basically anything he talks about, but at least the atmosphere of the songs and the sort of some of the emotion, you can, oh boy, so he got a lot of material for you. My fourth most listened to artist was Loathe, which is also not particularly surprising. They are another British band that I would describe in this, I guess we're going to call it Zoomercore now. Not a terrible descriptor. I would describe them as this sort of, not Zoomercore, Zoomergaze. I would describe them as this kind of alternative metal, shoegaze kind of fusion band. That's the best way that I can describe them. They have an album called I Let It In and It Took Everything, which has this really, for me, a really great mix of these heavy, intensely atmospheric, kind of spacey, shoegazy guitars and stuff like that, and then just these very comparably much harder and more jagged sounding kind of metal, heavy metal riffs and drops, and screaming or aggression in it. I'm a really, really big fan of the tracks Sad Cartoon, Two-Way Mirror, and Screaming. I also really liked Is It Really You? Just, I don't know, it hits this vibe. I feel like I've described them about as extensively as I can. They don't have a ton of music out yet. They, according to, I just pulled up everybody I'm talking about on All Music. Their most recent album was that one from 2020. I think they might have put out an EP or a single since then. But yeah, like a really interesting modern act. And then finally, Drug Church, which was a band that I discovered, I think, pretty early into the year, and really clicked with me. The first song that I heard from them was called Weed Pin, off of their album Cheer, and I thought it was I was just immediately really into the sound. And the more that I listened to them, everything kind of hits on not exactly the same sound, but a very consistent musical vision. Drug Church I would describe as being, I guess, a lot more on the punk, excuse me, the punk end of the spectrum of these sorts of artists, especially not just musically but also lyrics wise. They are one of few artists who I feel like is able to consistently talk about political or social issues. Maybe not in anything incredibly specific, not all the time, but in a way that feels pertinent. And in my video on the War in Heaven, I used a lyric from one of their songs, Unlicensed Hall Monitor, which is a song entirely about people, this new type of influential, you might call them an influencer on the internet, the influence net, who are like literally just like Nazi sympathizers in private, who are giving people advice on how to live their lives. And this weird social climate where everyone can have a platform, and a lot of really terrible people have platforms. They're the only artist who has been able to write lyrics about reading comments, like reading YouTube comments, that uh, isn't cringy to me. There's also like a certain amount of humor in their music. They have a track called "But Does It Work," and it has this kind of funny structure. The overall premise of the song is feeling like just a bunch of things just aren't going the way that the singer wants them to. They don't work, so to speak. It's just men and women, nothing works. I tried men and men, still didn't work. Woman and woman, I presume, nothing works. And that always kind of makes me laugh. And then the chorus is just it's the lyrics: variations on a theme, nothing works. Variations on a theme, nothing works. I really love their when did this come out? 2015 album. God, 2015. Hit Your Head, that has a lot of songs that I really dig on. Specific Aging Jerk, Bagged, Drunk Tank, Hit Your Head, Greedy. They have this song off at the very end of it. It's called What, which is actually just like a weird spoken word story thing, with like this just backing instrumentation that sort of develops as the story progresses. And the first time I heard it, I was in like a really bad mood, and it came up because I was listening to this album, and it just completely sucked the air out of the room, and I was just absolutely transfixed on it. It's one of the most engrossing songs I've ever heard. It's called What. Their most recent album for 2022, Hygiene. I didn't dig on it too much when I first heard it, but I re-listened to it again in the last couple weeks. I was listening through to it, and I think I actually really like it. It's more so that it's a slight change in sound. I would call it, in some sense, I don't know, cleaner or poppier doesn't quite. It's not the right word for it. It's a little more anthemic overall than their previous work, which I think was a little off-putting to me at first, because I was used to their very almost, I would call it off-kilter sort of sound. Like I was listening a lot to a track off of their album before that, Cheer, called oh my god, why is it escaping me? It's called Tiresome. And the very beginning of the song is this very distorted guitar, the guitar, I think it's guitar, it might be bass. I'm so bad at picking out instruments, but it's just like and a lot of their music has this, just like, there's always something kind of wrong with it going. So something's always kind of going wrong at some point, in a very calculated, I would say a calculated and an intentional artistic way, not out of just incompetence. Weird little noises kind of sparking here and there. And their last album actually does, when I listen to it a little closer, does still have those elements, but it's a little bigger feeling, if that makes sense. But I quite enjoyed it. They're also, a lot of these artists are relatively new, and I've discovered within the last year or two, a year and a half perhaps, and yeah, it's nice to discover new music, because I don't know, sometimes I feel like I get stuck into a rut of listening to the same stuff over. Geez, I shouldn't have eaten like 10 minutes before recording this, over and over and over again. And then if you look at I guess I could just quickly glance through my top tracks. So funny enough, the top one is from a band that is not on the top artists. It is Need To by Pinegrove, which is a song that I used at the end of my, near the end of my of my arcades video. Have you noticed that I use a lot of music that I use Fleshwater at the start of the at the start of the Illbleed video as well. Have you noticed that I use a lot of music that I like in the things that I make? So Need To is from this artist called Pinegrove, which is this kind of like newy, folksy sort of, I don't know, what's a good descriptor for them? Like alternative rock folk sort of stuff. So the reason it's just this one song is that I listened to the album that this is off of, and I'm actually not a super huge fan of the album as a whole. I think it's like a little bit too long. Although there are a couple other tracks that I do quite like from it. But Need To is probably the one that hit me the hardest. It's the first one that I heard. Apparently, this song got really big off of TikTok. I don't use TikTok. Maybe that's why it randomly got recommended to me. But who's to say? I found it on sort of on my own without hearing it in another place, and then I found out apparently there was some kind of TikTok meme related to this song. But whatever, I think it's a great song. It hits on this very, very melancholic, folksy type music. Again, I'm a big Modest Mouse fan, and they have a lot of those elements in their stuff. I love the story that's told in it. In this very small, this very compact, like only a couple lines, you get this whole emotional story that isn't specific in any kind of way, but this experience of being like dejected and kind of wanting to walk away from a situation, and then the last moment kind of second guessing yourself. The reason it's called Need To is because the last lines are it's nothing worth talking about. Then there's a little break. Then why do I feel the need to? And it never really ends. It never really finishes the thought. It's just this kind of like, it's this captures this really cool moment in the middle of two different emotional states where the singer is kind of like is battling between kind of this sort of cynicism, it feels like, and earnestness and wanting to care about something and be invested in something. And it's this middle ground that I think is really fascinating, because I think a lot of people have felt that, as I've absolutely felt that at some point, in big ways and small ways. And I've never heard a song really capture that emotional state where you're second guessing whether or not you really want to like completely distance drop all your investment in something. That's kind of the only exception on the top tracks list that they've put together. The rest are songs from artists that I've already talked about. A Sad Cartoon by Loathe, which I loved. This, If Anything, by Fleshwater, that's off of their 2020 demo, which I loved. And then the last two are Million Miles of Fun and Weed Pin from Drug Church, which I would recommend both of those. I used Million Miles of Fun in the intro to... I used two Drug Church songs in the War in Heaven video. I used Unlicensed Hall Monitor when I was talking about Nazism, and I used Million Miles of Fun in the intro to that video. So I don't know if you've liked any of the non-OS video game OST music. Most of the music that I use in my videos is game OST. One, just because, I don't know, copyright claim stuff. I'm less worried about it now because I'm Patreon supported. But also just, I feel like the game OST fits the theme of my channel. But when I do use other licensed music from musical acts, it tends to be stuff that I care a lot about, or the music that I enjoy a lot. So, or that I just so happen to be listening to a lot at the moment. So, if you have ever enjoyed any of that stuff, then I would recommend you check out some of these art. Maybe Lil Peep is like the one exception, because that is like definitely the outlier in the room. But yeah, you might like the other stuff that I've recommended. I think it's funny. They had this like I don't know if it's AI generated or how they do it. Your 2023 as an album cover, and it's a tribute to drama, sadness, amped up tempos, and Pine Grove. So, aren't I a huge fucking nerd?